Substantiate, to establish by proof or competent evidence. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Substantiate podcast. And today I am here joined with Corey Lieblein. How are you today, Corey?
Good, Will. How are you?
Good. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, Corey and I drafted teams of football teams of CEOs and entrepreneurs playing flag football. So then in this week's episode, we're going to kind of walk through some scenarios and decide on some positions for our teams.
Will, before we start, I want to put out something to the listeners of this podcast is that Will is a Giants fan and they are 1-5. I am a Steelers fan. We are now 6-0. So we already have the advantage of the fact that my team is far superior to Will's team. All right, Will, I had to give you that little zinger in there.
It burns.
It burns, I know.
All right, so now just quickly to summarize our teams from last week. Your team is going in order from first round to sixth round. Sam Walton, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Ray Kroc, Henry Ford, and Sergey Brin and Larry Page, who we morphed together into one person because their height and weights were almost the same, as well as just being the Google boys. So then on my team, same order, first to last, Elon Musk, Phil Knight, Mark Cuban, Walt Disney, Mark Zuckerberg, and Tim Cook. So last week we said that we would assign each player a position, or that we wouldn't assign a player a position until the teams were final. So now the teams are final, so it is now our opportunities to assign offensive positions to our teams. So starting off with Sam Walton, or whatever order you want to, what is your team looking like?
Sure. I have Sam Walton as quarterback. My two wide receivers are Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos. My running back / blocker is Ray Kroc. And then I have Henry Ford and Sergey Brin both playing tight end.
All right, nice. So what are some of your thoughts behind those? And I don't know if you switched these intentionally, but like last week, you were talking about maybe having Steve Jobs as a running back. So if those were your thoughts at the beginning, why do you prefer Ray Kroc there instead of Steve Jobs?
Great question. I was looking at my lineup and I liked Ray Kroc as my blocker / quarterback protector / runner, because the guy was such a bull. The guy was so aggressive in business. Anybody in his path, he just ran right through. So that's why I made him my blocker / running back instead of Steve Jobs.
And also one other thing I did notice is Steve Jobs is 6'2", 154, and Ray Kroc is 5'5", 159. So I think in terms of height-wise, I think that was also a smart decision.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so now coming down to my team, I have Mark Cuban as my quarterback. Maybe he can try to calm down some of the other players because he's got some experience in the sports industry and keep everyone together and on track. And then I have Phil Knight as a running back. As I mentioned last week, Phil Knight founded Nike, and running backs, their job is to run, and you run wearing shoes. So there's Phil Knight. And then kind of like a blocker / other positions, like you were talking about on your team with Ray Kroc, I have Elon Musk here, who's a big guy. He is 6'2", 205.
He's your what? Wide receiver?
He is going to be my tight end as well as being sort of a blocker.
Okay.
So now then moving on to the last three, Walt Disney, Mark Zuckerberg, and Tim Cook. So Walt Disney, I'm listing as a wide receiver. Also, as I mentioned last week, Disney they make you walk through the gift shop on your way out of the theme park or out of the ride. And so I think Walt Disney will get the business done. He's going to make that final catch in the end zone to win the game for me.
Okay.
And so now Mark Zuckerberg I have as a running back / wide receiver. He's a bit shorter. Mark Zuckerberg is 5'7", 154. So I think he may be one of those halfback options that goes out for a screen sometimes or a short passing route. And then last but not
you have Zuckerberg as what? Wide receiver?
No, really a running back.
Or running back, okay.
And then lastly, Tim Cook. He's going to be a wide receiver for me. Last week, when we were towards the end of the draft, we were talking about how there's not as many great tight end choices. And that was at least tight ends that were left. And I hadn't even realized that Elon Musk is 6'2", 205, and Mark Cuban is 6'3", 216, just some bigger, heavier guys. So originally I drafted Tim Cook to be in a tight end position, but instead Tim Cook is 6'2" and only 187 compared to a bit lighter compared to some of his teammates. So he's just going to be another wide receiver for me.
Okay.
All right. So now that you know my offense and I know your offense, so what kinds of matchups are we looking at defensively? And you're not limited to man defense. You can do any form, but we decided we're not going to include rushing the quarterback.
So the first thing I want to talk about with you is we chose our entrepreneurs based on their entrepreneurial ability and how their skill set, not their physical stature, would lend itself on a football team. So I want to make sure that that's what you were thinking as well.
Yes. The physical qualities will still be they'll still technically be there, but we'll definitely override that with their personalities and characteristics.
Okay, got it. So why don't you name a player and I'll tell you who I would match up against them on the defensive side, if that's okay.
All right. So we'll go through my receivers first. So who's guarding Walt Disney?
Walt Disney, I'm going to put Sergey Brin as his defender.
Sergey Page.
Oh, sorry. We mixed them together. Correct. Sergey Page, because we mixed together Sergey and Larry Page to make one player Sergey Page. Correct.
Yep. Okay. All right. So now on to another wide receiver. Let's go with Tim Cook.
Tim Cook, who I think is a little bit of a marshmallow, if you ask me, by the way. We'll get to that later. Tim Cook, I'm going to put Steve Jobs on Tim Cook, if that makes any sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. And we'll talk about that later. So one Apple CEO to another.
All right. So now on to my running back. So we'll sort of shift into running backs with Mark Zuckerberg, who's going to be also potentially like a screen option for me.
Ray Kroc.
Ray Kroc.
Okay.
And next, another solely running back, Phil Knight.
Phil Knight. That's a tough one.
And just reminding you still have Sam Walton, Jeff Bezos, and Henry Ford.
Yeah, I know. Phil Knight. I'm going to go Henry Ford because I think that they're such an amazingly even matchup. Mm-hmm. So I like when you have two guys who are completely just equally matched, and then it becomes just a battle of just will.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put Henry Ford on Phil Knight.
Henry Ford coming from a bit of an older time where sports was different. Do you have any concern about his experience in athletics?
Well, I'm looking at it from a sheer business prowess standpoint. and less about modern day athletics. Phil Knight, how old is Phil Knight? Phil Knight's got to be close to 80 years old at this point anyway. So it's not like they're one guy. It's not like it's Zuckerberg, in the 21st century versus Henry Ford. But I'm just looking at just simple business prowess. I think that there's such a great matchup because they were both just visionaries and had, changed their respective worlds. As by the way, did most of the entrepreneurs on the list besides Tim Cook, who I'm going to call out as your marshmallow player on the entire field on both sides is Tim Cook. Personally, I think Tim Cook should not be part of this game. I think the referee should come in and throw him out of the game and eject him. But again, it was your choice to draft him. But I have to get this out there, Will. I don't like him on the field. I don't respect him on the field.
So that's why you put Steve Jobs on him.
That's right. To school him and say, son, you simply ran this business. Yeah, you ran IBM for a while. Yeah, you were a chief operating officer of Apple. But come on, all you are is a hired hand.
Not in for the long run.
No.
Elon Musk, he is listed as a tight end, and he is maybe the craziest person on my team, the guy that most well defines the 21st century. Obviously with Tesla and SpaceX, he is just a very eccentric guy. So I think you're going to need someone that is equal to him to guard him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so agreed. Elon Musk is a force of nature. But I was just looking at the top 50 most wealthy people of 2020. And Jeff Bezos, between him and his ex-wife, I think double or triple Bezos, Musk's net worth. So I'm putting the richest man in the world on planet Earth to defend Elon Musk.
I think that's definitely the better choice out of the two, Sam Walton and Jeff Bezos there. And Elon Musk, he's just, in order to defend against him, I would say that you would need someone that's kind of like that, understands where he's coming from and has sort of been in that area, but also knows how to calm down and actually play the game for the purpose of winning.
I agree with you, Will, but there is also one thing I want to point out to do a little bit more trash talking before we start to play our game.
Wow.
And I think trash talk is super important. I've already trash talked your boy Tim Cook that he's a marshmallow and shouldn't be on the field, but when I was looking at Forbes' top 50 most wealthiest people in the world of 2020, if you take Sam Walton's heirs, right, he's got 5 or 6 heirs all in the top 20. If you put all of their wealth together, they dwarf Jeff Bezos. And I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's so interesting that what an incredible just visionary he was. And not only do I have the richest guy by himself on my team, but if you Sam Walton made 5 of his heirs in the top 20 wealthiest people in the world, and together they surpassed Bezos.
Well, to continue with the trash talking, Ray Kroc, I had McDonald's last night and it was garbage.
Okay. How many billions of people have eaten at McDonald's?
I'd say over a billion.
Billions. I have a picture of me in the middle of Zhangjiang, China. I was at a trade show, like this has got to be 6-7 years ago. And I went to McDonald's for lunch at the trade show convention center because there was nowhere else to eat. There were literally 10,000 people in that one McDonald's, all the way in China. Okay, wow. Come on. So I'm sorry you had a bad meal, but Ray Kroc is a bulldog.
I guess continuing on, the last matchup you have is for my quarterback, Mark Cuban. So we decided we're not really going to do too much rushing the quarterback. So I guess Sam Walton is a bit of your free safety.
Fair enough.
So my team is a bit bigger than yours, and I think they may get a little more tired. Just in terms of who they are, they've all had different. I mean, you call Tim Cook a marshmallow, debatable.
Yeah, he is a marshmallow.
Debatable. And then just everyone else in my team, some bigger guys for the tight ends and blocker. It may be a physical game, and I'm going to try to preserve their energy and run a bit of zone defense along with some man-to-man elements.
I don't blame you, by the way. If you have a marshmallow of a team like you do, you better play zone defense, because you don't have the ability with that marshmallow. If you want to have a pillow fight, you better play zone defense.
Wow. Well, I was going to start it off with Mark Zuckerberg as a linebacker, someone to play a bit closer for a bit to stop the running game. Because when you've got Ray Kroc coming out there, you said it, he's kind of a beast. And then instead, Mark Zuckerberg will come in and he'll just rip that flag off. So then about the marshmallow himself, according to you, Tim Cook is going to be doing some man-to-man work on Steve Jobs. Tim Cook, he may be a marshmallow, but hopefully that marshmallow, when it's put over the fire, will get big enough that it'll block the ball from coming into Steve Jobs' hands. And then Walt Disney, he may play a little bit of man, but primarily I want him just staying back, a bit of a quicker threat in the backfield, just as a bit of a safety or cornerback-ish type player.
I like that.
Yep. And then Mark Cuban, I'm going to have as another linebacker type player, just staying a bit closer to the line of scrimmage, stop a lot of that short game. Because to be honest, I don't see Sam Walton throwing too many bombs.
Well, first of all, let's start with this. Sam Walton has thrown a bomb from Bentonville, Arkansas, all the way to the farthest reaches on the planet, when there was no technology available to reach people on the other side of the planet. But keep going.
And then Elon Musk is going to be primarily guarding Sergey Page, the combination of Sergey Brin and Larry Page.
Okay, I like that.
And then last but not least, Phil Knight is similar to Walt Disney. He's going to play, again, primarily either as like a safety or a cornerback in my backfield.
Okay, love it.
All right, so now let's walk through maybe potentially one drive, like what kinds of plays you're running, how do you see your receivers and running backs? What kinds of formations are we looking at? Who's lining up on what sides, and where's the ball going to?
So I'm playing from, obviously we don't have any centers, so the QB will start the ball in his hands, right? We don't have any centers. Yep. So obviously I have Sam Walton as my QB, flanking Sam Walton. And we'll make it like almost like a virtual shotgun. So you have your wide receivers and your tight ends all on the line of scrimmage, and the quarterback is maybe 3 yards back. So next to him, I have Ray Kroc, kind of like when the running back lines up next to the quarterback in the shotgun. Then I have left and right of center, I have Henry Ford and Sergey Page. And then flanking those guys on the left side and right side, my wide receivers, I have Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos. And the offense we're going to run is between Jobs and Bezos. We're going to running a lot of crossing patterns, confusing the defense, being very innovative. And we're going to have Ford and Page running their quick ins and quick outs and quick slants. And then at the end, we're going to have Ray Kroc as like that fourth receiver. When somebody is going to rush the quarterback because he's taking too much time and you need a quick dump off pass, so you have Ray Kroc. Specifically
for Ray Kroc, I mean, I think my linebacker is down there. I think that Mark Zuckerberg or Mark Cuban, I got the two Marks sitting down there, and they're just going to rip that flag right off for Ray Kroc.
Okay, if they have any arms left. I'll give you that. I love Cuban. I think Cuban's a gritty, determined entrepreneur. The guy was selling plastic bags when he was like 7 years old, door to door. So I really I love that. And I also like Zuckerberg because he's nimble, he's smart. And so I love those two guys where you have them.
Yeah. And so then you said that you're going to run a lot of crossing patterns and stuff. And if I'm, say, midway through the game, you're starting to figure out that I'm playing primarily, if not all, a zone defense. And I think that isn't going to be as effective against my defense because of that. So say midway through the game, you're starting to realize that and are starting to change your offense. So what are your changes that you may make in that passing game?
So it's not the changes that I'll make. It's the changes that my entrepreneurs will make. The changes that my entrepreneurs have, when they fail and they realize that something isn't working, right? That they run back and they go get it done. So what the changes they would make are running from crossing patterns to say, you know what? We're going to have our tight ends run short, try to draw the defense in, and then run long post patterns or slants or fly patterns. So it's not going to be me. It's going to be my incredible team coming to the huddle on a timeout and saying, hey, coach, here's what we're going to do. This isn't working. Here's a great new strategy in order to go forward. I think besides the Marshmallow, we have a lot of great entrepreneurs on the team. I think that, of course.
Whoa. I thought the Marshmallow was on my team.
He is, besides the Marshmallow.
Yeah, but you said the Marshmallow, quote, on my team.
No, I meant on your team. I'm sorry. Besides the Marshmallow on your team, we have great entrepreneurs, but I like my entrepreneurs better. And one thing I think, Will, winners win. Winners win, Will. Anyway, so I think my players will tell me what they should or shouldn't do.
Yeah, and ideally for your guys, if I'm playing a zone defense, your goal is probably to spread them out as much as possible.
Yep.
If I have in this case, what's going to look like probably two cornerbacks or safeties, two linebackers, and two man-to-man. So ideally with those four guys playing zone, it's going to be either a box, a diamond, or kind of staggered in terms of front and back. Who do you think on your team is going to be the ones that are going to eventually try to spread out my defense? Who's going to the outside and who's going to the inside?
I'm going to put my tight ends going to the outside, going to the inside. And I'm going to spread you guys out and get into to make sure that my wide receivers get into single coverage. And by the way, you can run crossing patterns against zone defenses. You run pick plays. You can run a lot of confusing plays. At the end of the day, when you play, and I get it, you're playing zone because you're woefully undermatched. I get it. If I had your team, I would play zone too because I know that my team's better. So I don't blame you.
Maybe not better, but maybe a little bit faster, more stamina.
Like Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank says, stop the madness. Just playing with you, Will. You have a great team besides the Marshmallow Man.
Marshmallow.
The Marshmallow Man. We're going to call him Stay Puff. And for those of you who are around my age, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters. So we're going to call Tim Cook the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
All right. So now we talked about your receivers in your passing game primarily. So now Ray Kroc, how you said that maybe he'll be also blocking a little bit downfield. So how's he getting from that running back position to being able to block downfield? Or how are you going to incorporate his ability to block for a wide receiver or tight end down the field?
Well, just like every running back. And who is your running back again?
Phil Knight and Mark Zuckerberg.
Right. So just like in any regular football game, very rarely do running backs ever block for wide receivers. I would say that you'll see a running back block for a wide receiver in an NFL game, if you're lucky, 3 or 4 times a season, because what happens is the running back, it's a broken play, happens to run and cuts back to the other side of the field, 6 seconds into the play. So I don't see Ray Kroc really ever blocking for my wide receivers. What I see Ray Kroc doing is being, and his role will be protect my quarterback, Sam Walton, be there as a third or fourth option on a pass play to pick up those needed yards to get the first down. So I do not see him blocking for wide receiver.
Okay, so what it sounds like to me is he's going to be closer to the quarterback, closer to Sam Walton, and he may just be like a guy if the play isn't designed for him in case no one's open, which will be a lot. I mean, let's not lie here, that he can just be a dump off guy close to the line of scrimmage. But then by that point, my linebackers will just eat him up.
Okay. And what's so my question for you is, in terms of your linebackers eating them up, so will Tim Cook just be bringing water out to the other players, and will he be getting water for our players too, or no?
Wow. You can do it, water boy.
You can do it, water boy. Bobby Boucher, right? All right, let's keep going. Let's get into the game.
So now that we've talked about how your offense and my defense are going to look at this matchup, but
how do you think, here's a question for you, objectively, who do you think in terms of entrepreneurs has a stronger team?
In terms of entrepreneurs, so building from the ground up, I definitely say your team.
Okay, and I would say I agree, but I also think on your team you have a lot of, the one reason why, and I hate to tout your team, besides Tim Cook, you have a lot of bulldogs in your team. You have a lot of people with incredible vision to change the world. Zuckerberg, incredible. Walt Disney, incredible. Cuban's just a hard-nosed, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania guy, right? So, I love your team. I love your team also, and we're joking around, but I think if we made like a real virtual game, this would be a great game to watch, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it definitely would, because one of the things that's great about how these episodes on the Substantiate podcast have come along is how, like, when you start by drafting the teams, you don't necessarily have a theme in mind for your team. But so far in the episodes that we've recorded and released, that the teams have kind of been built around that central theme, though, that you said it last week, your team was mainly made up of people that influenced your workspace, your industry, and how my team was starting to be like maybe a little more 21st century, maybe a little more modern, like Elon Musk, Nike, Phil Knight, Mark Cuban in the NBA, and Mark Zuckerberg in social media, and Tim Cook doesn't count, but Apple, and how the teams have really contrasted each other in a way that's been really interesting to talk about.
Okay. No, I think it's I agree, fully agree.
And so, flipping the tables now, when my team is on offense and your team is on defense, I'm going to be looking at, obviously, Mark Cuban's the quarterback. So Mark Zuckerberg as a running back, but also I'll be running some screenplays with him. So he may be lining up sometimes behind Mark Cuban, maybe sometimes next to him, and maybe sometimes even just lined up on the edge towards the wide receivers. But then I have Elon Musk, who's a bigger guy. He's a very strong guy, very interesting personality, and I have him listed as a tight end. So a lot of times he will be lining up closer to Mark Cuban. Part of being closer to the quarterback is you're usually running out, not in. And I think with Elon Musk and the way that he's going to play, I think that's going to be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then my other running back, Phil Knight, he's going to be probably the faster runner than Mark Zuckerberg. So if maybe I'll run some sort of option play, like triple option or something. And so maybe if there's a few guys there and you need to really go through a maze, then maybe Mark Zuckerberg will take the ball. But instead, if there's kind of some open ground like Daniel Jones on Thursday night, who just fell in the middle of the field, then maybe I'll hand it to Phil Knight, who's supposed to be an actual runner. And then lastly, with my two main receivers, the Marshmallow and Walt Disney. So Tim Cook, who's being guarded by Steve Jobs. I think a great part about having Tim Cook there is Tim Cook was my 6th pick, yet Steve Jobs was your 2nd pick. So I'm basically using the Marshmallow to just draw Steve Jobs away from a lot of the action. So in a way, Tim Cook is a bit of a decoy for me.
Yeah, but Tim Cook is also playing defensive back. If you want a decoy, you still have your decoy taking on a huge portion of 1/6 of your team on both sides of the ball. We're playing Iron Man football, right?
Because that's how my team is built, though. We got teamwork. We rely on each other.
Fair enough.
We rely on Tim Cook to draw Steve Jobs away. That was my offense. Now, how is your defense going to look in this matchup?
My defense, again, what do we have? We have your wide receiver, Disney versus Sergey Brin. We're 100% going man-to-man. So let's start with that. My entrepreneurs are going to be in the huddle, and they're going to say the famous, I got my guy, don't worry about it, you take care of your guy.
Yeah.
So I think we're fast, we're nimble, we're tough, we have a lot of ingenuity. So we are 100% going straight up man-to-man, my head on your head. And so that is going to be our very, very, very simple strategy.
Okay, so you gave the matchups before, so just to summarize it, Sam Walton's playing a bit of a safety position, Steve Jobs on Tim Cook. Again, there, Tim Cook can draw away Steve Jobs, like I was just saying.
Well, no, you have Tim Cook as wide receiver, so Steve Jobs is going to play the cornerback. You have Zuckerberg playing running back, which is perfect for Ray Kroc, right? Because he's my bulldog who's going to be in there, shutting all your little screens down. And even though we're playing flag football, we've all played flag football. Sometimes people do bump a little bit and get a little roughed up, even though you're not supposed to. You have Ray Knight as another running back, and I have Henry Ford. Walt Disney is another wide receiver. So you're looking at like a Sergey Page being a cornerback, and then you have Elon Musk as your tight end. So it'd make Bezos almost like your linebacker and almost like the general of the defense.
Yeah, I mean, before I was just referring to a little bit early in the episode, the original matchups that you had created. So yeah, I mean, those definitely fit in with it. So the way you're sounding it, so although you may be playing man, you're probably not lining up on the line of scrimmage. You may start back, try to confuse the offense a little bit, and then kind of develop into it as the play goes along. So
my cornerbacks are not going to be lined up in the line of scrimmage. They'll be dropped back by maybe like 3, 4, 5 yards. And then my Ray Kroc, my almost like my linebackers, which is your Ray Kroc and your Henry Ford. They're going to be closer to the line of scrimmage. But again, we're very much we're going 6-on-6, man to man, because we think we would match up beautifully there.
Yeah, so then to me it sounds like I should be using Mark Zuckerberg a lot and running a bunch of screens, because it sounds like if you're not even lining up everyone on the line of scrimmage, then I may be able to get consistent 3-5 yards.
No, I told you, Ray Kroc and Sergey are going to be pretty much on the line. And by the way, you can run to Zuckerberg all you want. Zuckerberg will be out of the game. If you do that, after the first quarter, he'll have a broken shoulder, right? A broken arm and a broken leg and probably a concussion at that point. Because every time that Kroc goes to get his flag, he's going to shoulder him too at the same time. So, but I think Zuckerberg is going to, he's going to get beat up a little bit by Kroc physically because Kroc's that kind of entrepreneur. So I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, and remind me who you said was going to be guarding Phil Knight.
Phil Knight, we had, going back, it was Henry Ford.
Henry Ford, right.
Yeah.
So Henry Ford basically, he created the assembly line, very efficient. So in that sense, I'm a little surprised that you're still doing the man-to-man defense, because theoretically it's less efficient. But at the same time, with specifically Phil Knight, what strategies is he or can he use to lock down Phil Knight?
And that's where I really think on this one, I think it's a really incredible matchup. And I don't think that either of them has the advantage. So I think on this one, Phil Knight is going to get, and Phil Knight is your running back, correct?
Phil Knight is my running back.
I think Phil Knight's going to have a lot of great plays where he's going to run the ball, catch a lot of passes, and get some great yards. And I also think there's going to be a play where Henry Ford blocks a lot of passes, comes up with 1 or 2 interceptions. I think that this is a very, very, very even matchup, and I think they're both going to make big plays in the game because they're both such strong people. And I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about their abilities to overcome huge obstacles. Henry Ford in the pre-industrial era, right, who builds an assembly line to build automobiles. Phil Knight trying to build a company from nothing that was still overrun by very big brands back in the day. So I think they're a great matchup. So I think they're both going to be very effective against each other, and they're both going to come up with some big plays.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so now moving on to the last part of this week's episode, which will be sort of handing out, as I put in air quotes, some awards. So obviously you dubbed Tim Cook the Marshmallow.
Absolutely the Marshmallow.
So coming up with either nicknames or awards for these players. So
can I interrupt you? Before you do that, who do you give the win to?
To me, it comes down to how well your receivers are playing. So I agree that our running backs that they're fairly well matched. And then on the other side of the ball on defense, that guarding each other, they'll be both effective. So number one, it will come down to that if one of those players explodes. So which running back is more likely to, I guess, exceed expectations? And then for the wide receivers, when we're looking at your receivers, my receivers, and tight ends for that matter, I think that your tight ends, that they're just a little bit Henry Ford and Sergey Page. I don't think they have the same electricity that Elon Musk has. And I'm not, no pun intended, as Elon Musk with Tesla electric cars. I just think that Elon Musk and my team, the components of my team is that we're supposed to be more fun. We're supposed to be more electric. We're supposed to be the cooler team. And it really just depends on how much that narrative actually translates to the gameplay. And so for me, it comes down to that. So
what would be the final score in your opinion, and why? Give me.
Yep. So it depends on the quarterback. So Sam Walton and Mark Cuban. Yep. And I think that they're both very interested in, Sam Walton's going to run it in a very quick manner. He's going to get to the end zone quickly. But but Mark Cuban, he's going to be maybe looking a bit more in the long game. And in that, I have to hand it to Sam Walton, because inevitably, like, you just got to get in the end zone. And I think that difference we didn't say that there will be halftime or something, but, if there's a coin toss, whoever starts with the ball, or it would probably be my team because you had the first pick. But just all of that, I think all added up. Sam Walton, if he's able to find his wide receivers, if he can get the open look through my zone defense, then I think it's your team that's winning. And I think the final score is going to be a higher score. So looking at strictly touchdowns, so I'm going to say each touchdown obviously being worth 7 points.
Yep.
I'm going to give it either 49-35 or 42-35. So a 1-2 touchdown difference.
Yeah. And I had the final score at 35-28 in my favor. I think that your team that you put together, I think of the 12 people on the full roster, 11 of the 12 are completely it's amazing when you see these entrepreneurs. The only reason why I gave us the 1 touchdown lead and the 1 touchdown was because of Tim Cook. And we joke about Tim Cook. Obviously, he's a genius. He's done incredible things, but there's a difference between a guy who runs a business that is a gazillion dollar business, and a guy, or I shouldn't say guy, an entrepreneur that starts it and has the vision. But I will tell you, the entrepreneurs that we put into the draft and drafted, if this game were to be played, you'd fill the biggest arena in the world to watch it. It'd be an absolutely great game. And it's just so much fun. And I applaud you for, just for articulating your thoughts and your opinions and talking about entrepreneurs. So this has been a lot of fun, but it's an incredible game. It would be an incredible game.
Yeah. And however, if you said that the Vegas odds were your team at 21, then I got the betting odds.
Will won. You won. You covered the spread. You definitely covered the spread.
Yep. So for everyone that put a bet on this week's episode, if you put it on me, then you won.
Fair enough. You covered the spread. I'm very proud of you. Very proud of you.
Yep. Right. So now lastly, just going to give a defensive player and an MVP before we sign off. So who's going to be the most impactful defensive player on the field today?
The most impactful defensive player.
In a good way.
Yeah. I'm going to say Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. And the reason is he's looking, in my opinion, as an entrepreneur, as someone who is in the quasi technology space, there were a lot of people on the field who have changed the world that we live in today. I think that he is the one that will change the world of tomorrow. Imagine a world with no combustion engines and no pollution, which is the way we're going. Yes, SpaceX is important. Imagine they're working towards a battery that you could drive from New York to LA and never stop to recharge it. He's also, talking about solar technology as well, with his roof shingles that are architectural and gorgeous, where we will not rely on, it's a new alternative and natural form of energy, the sun, of course. And then the one thing I think is the way he'll change the world, and it's not really talked about, is his driverless technology, which will change the world to be. No more falling asleep at the world, no more drunk driving, fatalities, giving the elderly a more free life to live because they're not relying on someone to drive them from point A to point B. So I would definitely give Elon Musk the defensive player of the game. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. And his matchup is going to be primarily with Sergey Page. And so, yeah, you mentioned being a very tech guy. He's guarding another tech guy, so he knows the ins and outs of what's going on with Sergey Brin and Larry Page. So, yeah, all of that you said, plus that extra advantage of kind of knowing Sergey Page's strategy-ish, I think all of that adds up, and I think that's a good choice for the defensive player.
Okay, and who do you have here as the offensive player of the game?
As the offensive player, I would definitely have to give this one to Sam Walton. I mean, if he's the winning quarterback, the quarterback is the main part of the offense. On almost every NFL team, the offensive captain, again, with a few exceptions, but in most places, the offensive captain is a quarterback. And that's just an example of how important the quarterback is. Anything that has to do with a wide receiver or a tight end, and even most things to do with a running back, even if it's just a little bit of a handoff, all of that comes from the quarterback. And the offensive player would definitely have to be Sam Walton, in my opinion.
I love it. I couldn't agree anymore.
All right. And so then lastly, on to the MVP. So the offensive and defensive players were on different teams. And I think it's fair to say that the MVP should come from the winning team, the Corey Lieblein team.
Woohoo!
So I think that your input would be the most effective for this award. So who's this going to?
Yeah, just like most Super Bowls, the winning quarterback is traditionally the MVP. So Sam Walton for the team MVP is definitely Sam Walton on our side. The way he's changed the entire world shops and lives. He's truly amazing. So we give Sam Walton the team MVP.
Yep, and that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Substantiate podcast. Come back next week for another episode and follow our social medias on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at substantiatepod. And leave us 5-star review if you're listening in Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number one, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number one way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at substantiatepod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.